Hello everyone, and welcome to the History of Scotland, episode 4, the 9th Legion and Roman End in Scotland. Now, a quick recap where we left off. In the previous episode, we obviously discussed the end of the Caledonians and the rise of the Kingdom of Picts, and their many fights with the Roman Empire on the southern territories of southern Scotland, and it was more of a brief overview of the Kingdom of Picts to give us a bit of a starting point in the history of Scotland and how that will later interact with the Saxon kingdoms and then eventually the Vikings, etc. This episode I want to be a bit different. I wanted to touch on the 9th Legion themselves. The 9th Legion is something that's shrouded in mystery. Did it go missing in England? Did it go missing in Gaul in Germany? Or did it just get recalled to Rome? It's one of the many things we're going to be discussing in this episode. One of the most common theories is that the 9th Legion did go further than Hadrian's Wall and it got ambushed by Celtic Pictish tribes and then proceeded to go missing there. And then after we've done some speculating and look at the different theories, we're going to touch on the Roman end in Britain and Scotland. Now, the reason why this is more of a Roman-ish episode and less a Scotland history episode is, Scotland, at least the start of the history of Scotland, very evolved around the Roman way of life, Roman culture to the Roman religion, Christianity, that has been slowly influenced, as we touched in the last episode. So it only fits in, we give the Romans a good end. And we discuss why they left Britain and what happened to the 9th Legion. A bit of a fun episode. After this episode, I think we're going to be touching on the Saxon invasions and how that affects the Kingdom of Picts and how the Kingdom of Picts becomes a subsidiary of the Kingdom of Northumbria. And then further afoot is obviously the Vikings and then the Kingdom of Alba. Once we get to the Kingdom of Alba, it'll all be about Scotland, but as we all know, England and Scotland are very intertwined. At the moment, Rome controls most of England, so that's why we're touching a lot on Rome right now. Anyway, enough dilly-dallying, let's jump straight into this. The Roman 9th Legion was one of the many legions in the Roman Empire. It was a very prestigious legion, it served across the world, gained many honours, and reports are, or theories are, it was sent to Scotland to venture beyond Hadrian's Wall to subdue some rebellions by Pictish tribes there. So we're going to talk about the disappearance. So our last literary mention of the Legion dates to 82 AD amid Argolia's campaign in Scotland, when it is severely mauled by a Caledonian force, as we did mention in the previous episode. Presumably it remained with Argolia for the rest of his campaign, yet following its end in 84 AD, all mention of the Legion in surviving literature vanishes. Fortunately, we are not left completely clueless about what happened to the 9th after the Emperor's departure from Britain's shores. Inscriptions from York reveal that the 9th returned and remained stationed at the Roman fort, then known as Abericum, at least until 108 AD. Yet after that, all evidence about the 9th in Britain disappears. We know that by 122 AD, the Legion had been replaced by the 6th Legion, and by 165 AD, when a list of existing legions is drawn up in Rome, the 9th is nowhere to be found. So, what happened to it? The last known evidence for the 9th Legion's presence in Britain is the inscriptions from its base at York dating 108 AD. So, did it get crushed by the Celts? Our knowledge of the history of Britain at the start of the 1st century is shrouded in mystery, as we all know. Yet from limited evidence, we do have many of the original theories about the fate of the 9th Legion arose during the early reign of Hadrian. Contemporary historians highlight that there was serious unrest in Roman-occupied Britain, unrest that broke out into full-scale revolt in 118 AD. It is this evidence that originally led many scholars to believe that the 9th was destroyed in a defeat during the British War. Some have suggested it was annihilated during a British attack on the 9th's base in that fort of Abericum, spearheaded by the neighbouring Brigantes tribe, who are from the southern part of Scotland, who are known for were causing Rome much trouble at this time. Others, meanwhile, have suggested the Legion was crushed further north after it was dispatched to deal with a northern British uprising with about 118 AD, and we're talking about this going towards the Midlands of Scotland, past Antony's Wall that we mentioned in an earlier episode, and heading towards the mountains. Indeed, it was these theories that helped form the storyline of the famous novel The Eagle of the Ninth, where the legion was annihilated in northern Britain and consequently inspired Hadrian to construct Hadrian's Wall. Bit of a slight tangent, but the deepening political divide in the US and the apparent realignment of the world order through President Trump's foreign policy has prompted many comparisons to the fall of the Roman Empire. But can we really look back at any ancient civilization and draw parallels with those that exist today? And can lessons learn of the past really help us tackle the challenges of the present? Yet these are all theories, all of which based on very insecure evidence and squirrely assumption. Despite this, the belief that the Ninth was destroyed in Britain in 120 AD remained the dominant theory for much of the 19th and 20th centuries. No one could effectively challenge it. Yet in the past 50 years, new evidence, new archaeology digs, new technology has given us a chance to emerge new evidence that seems to reveal another fascinating chapter in the Legion's existence. Now, this is going to touch on the relocation to the Rhine theory around this. Novo Magus was located on the Rhine frontier. In 1959, a discovery was made at Hunnenberg Fortress near Nova Magnus in Lower Germany. Originally, this fortress had been occupied by the 10th Legion, yet in 103 AD, after serving with Trajan during the Dacian Wars, the 10th was relocated to modern-day Vienna. Who does it appear to replace the 10th at the Hunnenberg? None other than the 9th itself. In 1959, a roof tile dating 225 AD was discovered at this place, bearing the ownership mark of the 9th Legion. Later, further finds discovered nearby, also bearing the 9th stamp, confirmed the presence of the Legion in Lower Germany around that time. Some believe that the inscriptions belonged to a detachment of the 9th that was transferred to Lower Germany, and the rest of the Legion had indeed either been destroyed or disbanded in Britain in 120 AD. Indeed, one theory believes the 9th suffered mass desertions in Britain at this time, given the notorious ill discipline of the British legions, and that what remained was transferred to Germany. Yet many others now believe that in fact the whole legion was transferred to Germany, casting fresh doubt in the traditional theory that the 9th suffered a humiliating defeat at British hands at that time. Bronze object from the Netherlands. It also mentions the 9th Legion and dates roughly to 125 AD. It is understandable why the 9th may have been relocated to Germany at this time without suffering a great defeat. As mentioned during the early reign of Hadrian in the previous episode, it appears the southern Scottish tribes were becoming increasingly hostile to Roman rule and that they were spearheading the unrest in Britain along with the Pictish and Caledonian northern tribes. As the Brigantes inhabited the surrounding area around this, it is very probable there was an interchange between the soldiers and the tribe. After all, by 115 AD, the 9th Legion had been stationed there long term, and many legionnaires had likely taken Brigante wives and had children. This intermingling with the local population was inevitable and had occurred on many other Roman frontiers and would carry on to occur throughout history. Perhaps therefore it was the 9th's close bond with the Brigantes by 115 AD that influenced a Roman decision to relocate the legion to the continent. Perhaps their loyalty in an upcoming war with the increasingly unruly Brigantes was becoming suspect. So if the legion was no longer active by 165 AD and was not destroyed in Britain, where, when and how did the 9th meet its end, you ask? Potentially, was it eradicated in the East? It is now that our story takes us to another bizarre twist. Oh, shock, horror! As the answer may in fact lie in events occurring at this time in the Near East. Although many remember Hadrian's reign as one of peace, stability and prosperity, there was one great war that was fought during this time as emperor, the Third Jewish War of 132 AD to 135 AD, most famously known as the Bar Kokhba Revolt. Following the discovery of various inscriptions that suggest the legion survived until at least 140 AD, certain scholars now believe the 9th was transferred from Germany to the east near the end of Hadrian's reign to help deal with the Jewish revolt. There the legion may have remained, with one school of thought arguing that it was during this revolt that the legion finally met its end. Yet there is another possibility, again, one that extends the 9th's story yet further. Hope we're all enjoying this. In 161 AD, the commander led an unnamed legion into Armenia during a war with the Parthians. The result proved devastating, and his legion were annihilated by a Parthian army of horse archers near a town called Eligia. None survived. Could this unnamed legion have been the ninth? Did perhaps the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius not wish to add such a tragic defeat and demise of this legion to their histories? Just like in history, how everyone likes to fake their own losses and how they don't want to report on any deaths. This is a classic Roman technique, and we see it all the way back in Caesar times. Until further evidence arises, the fate of the Ninth Legion remains shrouded in mystery. Yet, as an archaeology continues to make discoveries, perhaps one day we will have a clearer answer. Now, my personal view on it, and this is, again, my personal view, one that I'm basing on the many theories that it has, I do believe at some point the Ninth Legion did in fact head north of Hadrian's Wall. So I don't think it was before Hadrian's Wall. I actually think it was still stationed after Hadrian's Wall was built, long after that. And I think there was some unrest in the southern territories of Scotland. As we discussed in our previous episodes, there was lots of incursions past Antony's Wall that caused legions and armies to retreat to Hadrian's Wall. But maybe, this is my thought, maybe the Ninth Legion left Hadrian's Wall to go reinforce Antony's Wall and hold that line. It then got ambushed by maybe a Pictish tribe, or maybe the southern Scottish tribes that were not fully Pictish but had Roman influence. And maybe once that the Ninth Legion had finally been annihilated there and ambushed, it then retreated back, all Roman people retreated back beyond Hadrian's Wall limits. This story has been told in many different films. One of my favourite films was Eagle of the North, as mentioned in the book, and I think another one is called The Ninth Legion. There's two of those films. One of them has, I think, Mark Wahlberg in. I think I'm correct in saying that. Either way, those two are kind of good films, and I'm kind of interested in this. You see this. The Ninth Legion mystery in a lot of popular culture these days. It was even in Doctor Who quite recently, a couple of years back. It was in that. You've had the films, books, New Evidence Arise, etc. Nobody knows what happened to it, and everyone's fascinated. But from the history of the area that I've researched and I'm looking into, I truly believe the Ninth Legion was wiped out in southern Scotland, and that may have caused a retreat to Hadrian's Wall or even further. I just cannot see the Legion being located so far east when it already had connecting ties to Roman Britain itself. But maybe that was the reason why it was moved. I mean, hell, could it have been recalled to Rome itself? Could it have been recalled to Rome and just disbanded because it was too close to the British people? And what we mean when it's saying it's too close is because you have legionnaires manning the Hadrian's Wall and Antony's Wall and in the surrounding areas, they start taking British wives, so Scottish tribes women, British tribe women. So in that area, people slowly transform, I guess, to be a bit more forgiving of the people, and I think Rome liked that. And obviously you see that a lot. I mean, if we look towards the 1100s in medieval times, you will have English nobles take Scottish noble wives, and vice versa on the border, even if the countries would still be at war. That's how intertwined the borders and the countries are, and this is no different really. Obviously we talked about in the last episode the influence of Roman Christianity into the Pictish kingdom and how that happened. Again, that was due to the intermingling between the Roman wall, the trade it offered, and also the marrying of said wives. So yeah, that's kind of a fun little part of the episode done. Hope you enjoyed that. I thought we'd touch on the Ninth Legion since it technically did go missing in Scotland, and it did technically go missing due to a Scottish tribe. So huzzah, go the Scottish! Another win for us. But we don't actually know. It is just all theories out there, and there is no hard evidence. If you have a theory about it, leave us a comment. It'll be interesting to hear what you have to say regarding the matter. Anyway, shall we now touch on the Roman end in Britain? By the early 5th century, the Roman Empire could no longer defend itself against either internal rebellion or the external threat posed by Germanic tribes expanding in the Western Europe, such as the Huns. Huns are a very popular one that we all know of, the Visigoths, Gothics, etc. This situation and its consequences governed the eventual disappearance of Britain's detachment from the rest of the empire. The Anglo-Saxons came to the southern part of England. They arrived, they began setting up shop and pushing out the British tribes already in the area. In the late 4th century, the empire was controlled by members of a dynasty that included the Emperor Theodosius I. This family retained political power within itself and formed alliances by intermarriage and with other dynasties, at the same time engaging in internecine power struggles and fighting off outsider contenders called usurpers, attempting to replace the ruling dynasty with their own. These internal conflicts drained the empire of both military and civilian resources. Many thousands of soldiers were lost in the battle in attempted coups by figures such as Magnus, Maxius, and Eugenius. The empire's historical relationship with Germanic tribes was sometimes hostile, over times cooperative, but ultimately fatal, as it was unable to prevent those tribes from assuming a dominant role in the relationship. By the early 5th century, as a result of severe losses and depleted tax income, the Western Roman Empire's military forces were dominated by Germanic troops, and the Romanized Germans played a significant role in the empire's internal politics. Various Germanic and other tribes beyond the frontiers were able to take advantage of the empire's weakened state, both to expand into Roman territory, but in some cases to move their entire population into lands once considered exclusively Roman, culminating in various successful migrations from 406 onwards. Such of these would be, the Visigoths, the Huns, and the Saxons over into England. Angles as well. The crossing of the Rhine caused intense fear in Britannia, prone as it was of fear of being cut off from the rest of the empire by raids on the primary communications route from Italy to the Channel coast. In the event, this was much more than just another raid. In 383 AD, the Roman general then assigned to Britain, Maxius, launched his successful bid for imperial power. Crossing to Gaul with his troops, he killed the Western Roman Emperor and ruled Gaul and Britain as Caesar, as a sub-emperor under Theodosius I. 383 AD is the last date for any evidence of Roman presence in the north and west of Britain, perhaps expecting troop assignments at the Tower on Holyhead Mountain in Anglesey and at western coastal ports such as Lancaster. Hint, little fun fact, I am from Lancaster. These outposts may have lasted into the 390s AD, but they were very minor presence intended primarily to stop attacks and settlement by groups from Ireland. Coins dated later than 383 AD have been excavated along Hadrian's Wall, suggesting that troops were not stripped from it, as once thought, or if they were quickly returned as soon as Maximus had won his victory in Gaul. In Britannia, in 540 AD, the Gildas attributes an exodus of troops and senior administrators from Britain to Maximus, saying that he left not only with all of his troops, but with also all its armoured bands, governor, and the flower of its use, never to return. Raids by the Saxons, the Picts, and the Scotti of Ireland had been ongoing in the late 4th century. These increased in the years after 383 AD. These were also large-scale permanent Irish settlements made along the coast of Wales under circumstances that remain unclear. Maximus campaigned in Britain against both the Picts and the Scotti, with historians differing on whether this was in the year 382 AD or 384 AD. Whether the campaign was before or after he became Caesar, basically. Welsh legend relates that before launching his usurpation, Maximus made preparations for an altered government and defence framework for the provinces. Figures such as Call Hen were said to be placed into key positions to protect the island in Maximus' absence. As such, claims were designed to buttress Welsh genealogy and land claims. They should be viewed with some scepticism. In 388 AD, Maximus led his army across the Alps into Italy in an attempt to claim the purple. The effort failed when he was defeated in Pannonia at the Battle of the Serve, modern-day Croatia, and at the Battle of Slovenia. He was then executed by Theodosius I. What a shame, what an end to a man. In 389 to 406 AD, with Maximus' death, Britain came back under the rule of Emperor Theodosius III. first until 392 AD, when the usurper would eventually successfully bid for the imperial power in the Western Roman Empire, surviving until 394 AD, when he was defeated and killed by Theodosius again the First. When Theodosius died in 395 AD, his 10-year-old son succeeded him as the Western Roman Emperor. The real power behind the throne, however, was his son-in-law, Theodosius' brother, and the father-in-law of the previous 10-year-old son. Britain was suffering raids by the Scotti, the Saxons, and the Picts sometime between 396 and 398 AD. The ruling 10-year-old allegedly ordered a campaign against the Picts. However, likely a naval campaign intended to end their seaborne raids on the east coast of Britain. He may also order campaigns against the Scotti in Ireland and the Saxons at the same time, but either way, this would be the last Roman campaign in Britain of which there is any record. There goes the end of the Roman invasions into Scotland. They finally secured their own land. In 401 and 402 AD, again he faced wars with the Visigothic king and the Ostrogothic king. Needing more military manpower, he stripped Hadrian's Wall of troops for the final time. 402 is the last date of any Roman coinage found in large numbers of Britain, suggesting either that the emperor also stripped the remaining troops from Britain, or that the empire could no longer afford to pay troops who were still in the area. Meanwhile, the Scots, Saxons, and Scotti continue their raids, which may have increased in scope. In 405 AD, for example, Niall of the Nine Hostages is described as having raided along the southern coast of Britain. Now again, Hadrian's Wall, undefended, Pictish tribes now being able to push through, claim ground, claim glory, claim loot. In 407 to 410 AD, on the last day of December 406, the Alans, Vandals, and Suebi living east of Gaul crossed the Rhine, possibly when it was frozen over, and began widespread devastation. As there was no effective Roman response, the remaining Roman military in Britain feared that a Germanic crossing of the Channel into Britain was next, and dispensed with imperial authority, an action perhaps made easier by the high probability that the troops had not been paid for some time. The intent was to choose a commander who would lead them in securing their future, but their first two choices, Marcus and Gritton, did not meet their expectations and were killed. Their third choice was the soldier Constantine III. Queen of Constantine III. In 407, Constantine took charge of the remaining troops in Britain, led them across the Channel into Gaul, rallied support there, and attempted to set himself up as the Western Roman Emperor. The current emperor, who we just discussed, loyalist forces south of the Alps were preoccupied with fending off the Visigoths and were unable to put down the rebellion swiftly, giving Constantine the opportunity to extend his empire to include Spain. In 409 AD, Constantine's control of the empire fell apart. Part of his military forces were in Hispania, modern-day Spain, making them unavailable for action in Gaul, and some of those in Gaul were swayed against him by loyalist Roman generals. The Germans living west of the Rhine River rose against him, perhaps encouraged by Roman royalists, and those living east of the river crossed into Gaul. Britain, now without any troops for protection and having suffered particularly severe Saxon raids in 408 and 409 AD, viewed the situation in Gaul with renewed alarm, perhaps feeling they had no hope or relief under Constantine. Both the Romano Britons and some of the Gauls expelled Constantine's magistrates in 409 AD or 410. The Byzantine historian directly blamed Constantine for the expulsion, saying that he had allowed the Saxons to raid and the Britons and Gauls were reduced to such straits that they revolted from the Roman Empire, rejected the Roman law, reverted to their native customs, and armed themselves to ensure their own safety. It has been suggested that when Zomus, the Byzantine historian, records that the natives expelled the Roman civilization administrated in 409 AD, he might have been referring to the Bagdoli rebellion of the Breton inhabitants of America, since he describes how, in the aftermath of the revolt, all American and the rest of Gaul followed the example of the Britanni. A later appeal for the help by the British communities was, according to this historian, rejected by the emperor in 410 AD. In a text called the Rescript of Coronaries of 411 AD, the Western emperor tells the British civets to look to their own defence, as his regime was still fighting usurpers. In in the south of Gaul and trying to deal with the Visigoths who were in the very south of Italy. The first reference to this rescript is written by the 6th century Byzantine scholar and is located randomly in the middle of a discussion of southern Italy. No further mention of Britain is made, which has led some, though not all, modern academics to suggest that the rescript does not apply to Britain, but to Bruttium in Italy. Historian Christopher Snyder wrote that the protocol dictated that the emperor address his correspondences to imperial officials, and that fact he did not implies that the cities of Britain were now the highest Roman authority remaining on the island. The idea that there had been a larger scale of political formation still intact on the island has not been completely discredited, however. At this time that the rescript was sent, the Roman emperor was holed up in Ravenna by the Visigoths and was unable to prevent the sack of Rome in 410 AD. He was certainly in no position to offer any relief to anyone. As for Constantine III, he was not equal to the intrigues of the Imperial Roman Empire, and by 411 AD his cause was spent. His son was killed, along with those major supporters who had not turned against him, and he himself, in the end, just like all good Roman emperors, thus ended Roman rule in Britain. So the Britons themselves eventually kicking the Roman Empire out due to, well, no defence, no taxes, no structure. It's a sad end really, but we all know the Roman Empire, at least the Western Roman Empire, had many problems, many internal rebellions, and that would certainly be a cause of its collapse really. Moving on back to the Kingdom of Picts and the King of Picts themselves, the Pictish way of life was not only under assault by the Christian missionaries that we mentioned in the past episode, but within their borders, but by an also growing power in the south. The rise of the Kingdom of Northumbria, which made regular incursions into Pictish lands, the strong central leadership in the form of a king of all the tribes instead of the old system of many tribal chiefs uniting for a time under the guidance of a single leader. Although it is unclear why the Picts felt the need for a central government, it is thought that they may have attributed the Northumbrians' effectiveness in conquest to their kings, and so sought to protect their lands by employing the same system of government. That's when the line of the Kingdom of Picts starts, and thus the Kingdom of Scotland will eventually come from this line. Obviously not full heritage of line, there is a change of families, dynasties, etc. But this is where it truly starts. We start to see proper structure in a kingdom in Scotland, uniting the land. Northumbria had the resources and the manpower to take large portions of the land from tribes such as the Scots, who had arrived from Ireland and settled in the southern part of Scotland, and the Britons of Strathclyde, both whom were then subject to the Angles of the Kingdom of Northumbria as well. The Angles had also ceded parts of the Pictish lands to the north, subjugating the people and installing kings whom they felt would serve their purposes. One of these Pictish kings, Brud MacBilly, also known as Brud MacBill, who is considered one of the greatest, if not the greatest, of the Pictish kings, we'll get on to him very soon, for halting the advance of the Angles of Northumbria and freeing his lands of their influence. In doing so, he would also remove the Northumbrian yoke from the Britons and the Scots to the south, as well as the other tribes, and more or less set the early boundaries of what would later become England, Scotland, and Wales. This is where it starts now, guys. This is where we're getting into proper historical records. We're getting a bit more records dated now, and we're jumping into a proper lineage, a proper structure of a Scottish nation. Although the Pictish kingdom does not control all of Scotland, as we discussed, there is a northern kingdom, there is an eastern kingdom, and the Pictish kingdom is kind of in the centre right, so to speak. That would later become the Kingdom of Alba when it would combine together, and then obviously the Kingdom of Scotland. So this is where it truly does start. Next episode, we're probably going to be touching on post-Roman era Scotland and touching on the Saxon arrival with the Northumbrians. The Northumbrians are going to be taking a massive part of the next episode, since they would tackle our Pictish country a lot. They would subjugate it and eventually take over quite a lot of their land until a king would rise to defeat them. So that's going to be our next episode. So Northumbria, Saxon arrival, and post-Roman era Scotland. After that episode, again, we're going to be touching probably more on Viking and Saxon relationships, maybe the Viking end in Britain after that, and then we can finally touch on the rise of Alba and the Kingdom of Alba. It's all about setting the scene so you guys know what is going on around England, Scotland and Wales, since it's all one country in a sense, and each of their civilizations, cultures, religion, etc. are intertwined, so are the wars and invasions of Vikings, for instance. Anyway, thank you all for listening today. Podcast is on iTunes, Spotify, PodBean, Soundcloud and YouTube, so please listen to it on many of those devices as you can. If you can, please leave a review, give any feedback where you can. If I've missed anything, if I've said anything incorrect, if there's any corrections you wish to give or feedback, please do comment below. I am always open to any criticism from you guys. Other than that, thank you all for the nice comments and downloads. Downloads have been booming massively recently, really enjoying it, really glad you are enjoying it too, guys. Other than that, I will leave you all till next week's episode, and we'll eventually get into the Kingdom of Northumbria versus the Kingdom of Picts. Who will win, the Saxons or the Scottish tribe? Find out next week. Have a great week, guys. Stay safe. Coronavirus is finally lifting in our country, so go and enjoy some sun. And I will see you all same time next week. Have a good one, guys. See you later.